All right, good afternoon. I'll start with an update on the situation in the Middle East. After weeks of destruction and distress, it is clear that there is no military solution to the current conflict in the Middle East. While no agreement was reached at the talks hosted by Pakistan between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran in Islamabad, the discussions themselves underscored the seriousness of their engagement and constituted a positive and meaningful step towards renewed dialogue. Given the deeply rooted differences, an agreement cannot be reached overnight, and the Secretary General calls on the talks to continue constructively in order for an agreement to be reached. At the same time, the ceasefire must absolutely be respected and all violations must cease. The Secretary General thanks the continued efforts of the mediators, Pakistan, which hosted the talks, as well as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey, and he calls for the international community to continue to support these efforts. The Secretary General stresses that all parties to this conflict must respect freedom of navigation, including in the Strait of Hormuz, in line with international law. We need to remember that some 20,000 seafarers have been caught up in this conflict and are currently stranded on ships, with hardships increasing daily. Disruptions in the maritime trade through the Strait of Hormuz have already had a direct impact well beyond the immediate region, with increased global economic fragility and insecurity in many sectors. The disruption of fertilizer and related raw material is already having a very negative impact on agriculture, worsening the perspectives of food insecurity. With that in mind, the Executive Director of the UN Office for Project Services, Jorge Moreira da Silva, working with the UN Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, the International Maritime Organization, and the International Chamber of Commerce, is continuing engaging extensively with relevant parties to design and operationalize the mechanism that for the Strait of Hormuz that we announced on March 27th. For his part, the Secretary General's personal envoy, Jean Arnaud, remains actively engaged in the region, consulting closely with key stakeholders and continuing his outreach in support of a comprehensive and durable agreement. And we may have a more official statement shortly after the briefing. Turning to the situation in Iran, our OCHA colleagues say that we and our partners are continuing to support the government-led humanitarian response in face of sharply rising needs. UNICEF has been working with its partners to support children and families, increasing psychosocial support. As needs grow, UNICEF is also helping to restore access to essential health services. In coordination with the Ministry of Health, 2 mobile health units, 8 primary healthcare tents, and more than 80 emergency primary healthcare kits have been deployed. Tents and emergency kits are also being delivered, helping to reach more than 225,000 people. For its part, the World Food Program has supported some 33,500 refugees with food and cash assistance. As you will have seen over the weekend, the principals of the Interagency Standing Committee, which brings together the heads of UN agencies and international NGO partners, expressed their alarm by the sustained violations of the rules of war and international humanitarian law in this conflict. In a statement, they noted that thousands of civilians have been killed, with many more displaced. Health workers and facilities have been targeted, while global supply chains are also impacted, driving up food and fuel prices. The principals of the committee spoke out against all attacks on civilians. Even wars have rules, they said, and these rules must be respected. Turning to Lebanon, as you well know, negotiations between Israeli and Lebanese authorities are expected tomorrow in Washington. We encourage both Lebanon and Israel to leverage all available diplomatic avenues at their disposal to immediately end hostilities and address outstanding provisions under Security Council Resolution 1701. We stand ready to work with the parties to facilitate efforts in that regard. Our special coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, continues her good officer's role in support of the parties towards the full implementation of that resolution and towards a permanent ceasefire and long-term solution to the conflict. We call on all parties to engage constructively in that regard. On the peacekeeping front, our UNIFIL Blue Helmets continue their operations on the ground in support of deconfliction, the protection of civilians, and humanitarian access to the extent possible amid the ongoing fighting. Peacekeepers continue to report rocket fire towards Israel and airstrikes in UNIFIL's area of operations, including around Shama, Atiri, and Bin Jabal Sector West, where heavy clashes are continuing. Peacekeepers also continue to encounter obstruction and aggressive behavior. Earlier today, Israel Defense Forces soldiers attempted to block the passage of a UN convoy. The UNIFIL convoy was able to pass after a few minutes. Separately today, Israeli Defense Forces soldiers fired warning shots over a UNIFIL position at Atiri. These followed the two incidents yesterday in which IDF tank rammed a UNIFIL vehicle near Shama. We once again remind all sides of their obligations to protect UN peacekeepers, to respect UN peacekeepers, and to respect our work and our facilities. On the humanitarian front, as high-intensity hostilities continue, you can imagine the humanitarian needs continue to grow and deepen across Lebanon, and civilians continue to bear the brunt of the fighting. Israeli military activities remains particularly intense in southern Lebanon and the western Bekaa governorate. As of yesterday, more than 2,000 people have been killed and over 6,500 injured. As casualties continue to rise according to the government, civilian infrastructure continues to be damaged. Our colleagues at UNICEF report at least 18 incidents affecting water systems across the country, damaging reservoirs, pumping stations, and the main supply lines, and disrupting people's access for safe water. Despite these severe access constraints, the ongoing hostilities, our humanitarian partners are continuing to deliver assistance wherever they can and however they can. Since the 2nd of March, UNICEF and WFP have reached some 100,000 people in hard-to-reach areas in Lebanon, providing life-saving support to children and their families. UNICEF has also helped more than 30,000 children by supplying educational and recreational and play material across 174 shelters in an effort to bring some sense of normality to the lives of these children. Our partners working in water and sanitation have provided more than 110,000 hygiene kits. We reiterate again that we need an immediate de-escalation of hostilities, the protection of civilians, including healthcare and humanitarian workers, sustained and unimpeded humanitarian access, and urgent funding so we can reach everyone who needs help. Turning to the occupied Palestinian territory, our colleagues at the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that Israeli authorities have reopened the Zikim crossing in northern Gaza for the first time in more than 40 days. Supplies were already offloaded there over the weekend, and UN cargo collection inside Gaza resumed earlier today. That started with food, nutrition, and other humanitarian items administered by the World Food Program as well as UNICEF. This will help address a critical need by allowing supplies to enter northern Gaza directly, so we don't have to truck them from the south. But major constraints remain. These include Israeli requirements related to custom clearance, which is often delayed, insufficient scanning capacity, which makes it difficult to secure approval for critical items, and blanket bans on specific UN agencies and NGO partners that are central and critical to our joint humanitarian effort in Gaza. Yesterday, the World Health Organization and its partners supported the medical evacuation of more than 24 patients and over 40 of their companions through the Rafah crossing. You'll recall that WHO suspended its support to medical evacuations led by the Ministry of Health following a security incident in which a person contracted by WHO to provide services was killed. WHO said the resumption followed commitments from relevant parties to ensure the safety of our patients, the people who accompany them, and the staff. Thousands of people still need medical services that are unavailable in Gaza. Our health partners tell us that more approvals are needed for equipment and other essential items to help local health systems recover so patients can access critical care inside Gaza. And yesterday, we and our partners offered medical care and information on food, water, psychosocial services to nearly 70 people who returned to Gaza through the Rafah crossing. Turning to Iraq, some of you asked me about the election of the new president in Iraq. Mr. Nizar Hamidi, and that election was done by the Council of Representatives. I can tell you that this is an important step towards the formation of a new government following the November 11th, 2025 parliamentary elections. Our Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed is back in New York after visiting Nigeria, where the country's displacement crisis and untapped economic potentials were in focus. Traveling to Zamfara and Benue with the UN country team, the Deputy Secretary General met communities on the front lines of insecurity and displacement, witnessing firsthand both the scale and the needs and the efforts underway to respond. Ms. Mohammed reaffirmed the UN's commitment to supporting Nigeria-led elections, with the UN country team set to remain closely engaged. I think you heard from Denise, but I can tell you that the Secretary General's personal envoy for Sudan, Pekka Haavisto, arrived in Berlin today and will remain there to attend the third International Sudan Conference scheduled for Wednesday, April 15th. Our humanitarian chief, Tom Fletcher, is also in Berlin and where he is attending the conference. The conference marks the tragic milestone of 3 years since the war in Sudan began, creating the world's largest humanitarian crisis. And the Secretary General is expected to deliver a video message to the conference, which we'll share under embargo shortly. Back here, the Security Council held a briefing on cooperation between the UN and regional and sub-regional organizations. Today focus was the European Union. Briefing the Council was the Chief of Foreign Policy for the European Union. Briefing for the UN was Khaled Kyari, our Assistant Secretary General for Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific. He noted that the European Union, conceived as a project of peace, integration, and cooperation in the aftermath of the Second World War, has evolved into a major economic and diplomatic actor and a strong advocate for multilateralism. He pointed out that in an increasingly complex and uncertain international environment, sustained engagement, dialogue, and trust building are essential, stressing that respect for international law and the Charter of the UN remains central to addressing the shared challenges, and the European Union plays an important role in advancing those principles. Just want to flag, I think you all saw the horrific stampede in Haiti over the weekend, and I can tell you the resident humanitarian coordinator for Haiti, Nicole Boniquasi, expressed her profound sadness following the tragedy that occurred at Citadelle La Ferrière on Saturday, where a crowd surge reportedly resulted in the deaths of around 30 people. Her office offered its deepest condolences to the bereaved families in solidarity with the government and the people of Haiti as a whole. She calls for survivors to receive appropriate medical and adequate support. Just a couple of peacekeeping notes. On Friday evening, we announced that the Secretary General had appointed Kiki Gebeho of Ghana as his special representative and head of mission in South Sudan. Ms. Gebeho will succeed the late Nicholas Haysom, to whom the Secretary General is profoundly grateful for his dedication, effective leadership of UNMISS, and distinguished service that he rendered to the UN in the cause of peace in the course of more than 2 decades of service. Ms. Gebeho brings over 25 years of experience in strategic planning, coordination, and management in political and development humanitarian affairs at the UN. Since 2024, she has been the Deputy Special Representative and Humanitarian Coordinator and Resident Coordinator in Sudan, and had been periodically served as the officer in charge for the mission. In Cyprus, our colleagues at UNFICYP said they're monitoring the situation in Pila Plateau. Its peacekeepers have stepped up patrols and are maintaining a visible presence on the ground following the observations of unauthorized entry by Turkish Cypriot security personnel in the UN buffer zone. UN Peacekeeping Force reiterates that unauthorized entry, presence, or activity within the buffer zone is a violation of the mission's mandate. Respect for the mandate is essential to maintaining stability in this very sensitive area. The UN Peacekeeping Force is actively engaging with all relevant parties to restore the status quo ante and prevent actions that could adversely affect calm and stability in the area. Maintaining calm and stability across the buffer zone remains the peacekeepers' highest priority. And in the Central African Republic, our colleagues on the peacekeeping mission there, MINUSCA, say that since Saturday, They've been supporting the deployment of sensitive electoral material as well as polling station stationary kits to remote areas of the country. This in advance of the legislative elections and by-elections scheduled for April 26. To date, more than 10 metric tons of electoral material have already been delivered to 6 prefectures in the country, marking a decisive milestone in the preparations for the second round of elections. As part of the Integrated Election Security Plan, the UN Peacekeeping Mission and National Defense and Security Forces are finalizing preparations for the election security, taking stock of lessons learned for the successful round of elections that took place on December 28th. Vanessa Frazier, the Special Representative for the Secretary General for Children Armed Conflict, is in Ukraine this week to engage with representatives of the government and to discuss the protection of conflict-affected children in Ukraine and new opportunities for collaboration. She will also engage with civil society organizations, UN community, and other stakeholders. Lastly, on a positive football note, Brazilian football legend Zico is leading a delegation from the Rio de Janeiro Club de Regatas do Flamengo to the UN to receive the club's Football for the Goals certificate of membership from Under-Secretary General Melissa Fleming, the head of Global Communications, and that will take place in the General Assembly Hall today. Flamengo is the latest professional club to join Football for the Goals and its leadership at the UN today to officially receive the club's Football for the Goals certificate. Zico will also be named the Football for the Goals champion, joining a select group of influential individuals in the world of football to use their platforms to advocate for the SDGs. And lastly, tomorrow my guest will be Julius van der Walt, Chief of the Mine Action Program in the occupied Palestinian territory. He will join us virtually to brief you on the situation regarding unexploded ordnance in Gaza. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. You said that the Secretary General believes that an agreement cannot be reached overnight and that talks must continue between the United States and Iran. In light of this, what is the Secretary General's response to the announcement of a blockade by President Trump? And is the United Nations involved in any way in trying to arrange continuation of those talks?
I'll take your last question first. Obviously, there's the quad of mediators, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. The talks were hosted by Pakistan in Islamabad. Our message to all parties that we speak to, including the ones Jean Arnaud is speaking to, is to do whatever we can to support these talks. And we hope that they will resume at various levels, but we hope they will go on. And as I said, we very much want to see the ceasefire holding. You know, we've seen a lot of statements regarding the situation in the Strait of Hormuz since the beginning of this conflict. For us, our position remains unchanged, is that all parties to this conflict must respect freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz in line with international law. Ephraim.
Thank you so much, Steph. On Lebanon, how did the Secretary General react when he learned that Prime Minister Nawaf Salam canceled his visit? He was supposed to meet with him today. Was there anything in particular that Mr. Guterres was looking forward to for that meeting? And if so...
Well, I mean, the Secretary General, you know, I think has a particularly good relationship with the Prime Minister, who he's met a number of times, notably in Beirut, and even before when he was named, but not yet confirmed. The Secretary General is very much focused on ensuring that the UN system supports Lebanon in this hour of crisis. I mean, our humanitarian system is truly mobilized. We fully understand why the Prime Minister could not travel, given everything that's going on. Yes, Minlu, and then.
Thank you, Stéphane. So on the U.S. specialized task force work to ensure the safe passage for fertilizers to go through the Strait of Hormuz, how will the U.S. blockade of the strait affect this task force work?
Well, I mean, the work that Jorge Maria da Silva is doing is still, I would say, in the consulting stage, intense consultations. He's meeting with a lot of different member states. He's been doing that for the last 10 days, trying to see how we can best operationalize it. But let's be clear, though, this task force is not yet operationalized. But what we want to see on the Strait of Hormuz is freedom of navigation, right? Ibtisam, then Gabriel.
Thank you. Just first quick follow-up on the Berlin conference. It's a donor conference, correct?
I will double check. I think it's donor and political as well, but I will double check.
Okay, and then on Ms. Brown, when she briefed us, she talked about the rape and the continuous killing, something that the UN has been reporting about for a long time. I guess my question here is, what's the message of the Secretary General, especially for parties who has influence on the warring parties, since they don't seem to be listening in Sudan? And and I mean parties who provide the warring parties with money, weapons, etc. And is the UN going also to start finally naming and shaming? Thank you.
The message is support the people of Sudan by supporting a peace process. The last thing the people of Sudan need are more drones, more bombs, more guns, and more bullets. And that is the message, probably delivered in a much more diplomatic way by our special envoy.
But it seems to be that this, for 3 years, it has not been working. So
we continue our efforts. Let's remember, the Secretary General is not his one with the finger on the trigger. Gabriel.
My question's been asked. Thank you.
Excellent. Alex.
Thanks, Steph. A quick follow-up on Ms. Vanessa Fraser and her trip to Ukraine. Is she also coming to Russia after that?
We will announce next step of her trips as they happen.
Thanks.
I'm going to go to the screen. I'll come back to you, Ephraim. Zara.
Hi, Steph. Does the initiation of the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by the United States constitute a violation of the ceasefire agreement with Iran, as well as a breach of international law regarding freedom of navigation? And what's the Secretary General's reaction on this matter, given the risk of escalating the energy crisis and rising global oil prices?
Well, you know, I think, as I said, the Secretary General's position has been consistent. No one should do anything that harms the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. That freedom of navigation is based on international law and years of custom. We need the freedom of navigation to be restored fully by everyone. We do not want to see a return to the conflict. We do not want to see a return to rockets being launched, to civilians being killed, and we encourage the parties to stay the course and resume the negotiations.
Thank you.
Ephraim.
Also on Sudan.
One second, I'll get back to you in a second. Go ahead, Ephraim.
Also on Sudan, Steph, Martin Griffith, as early as April 2023, has warned of a possible genocide being committed. Recently, also, several international bodies have said that there have been hallmark of genocide in the atrocities in Darfur. And today, Denise Brown mentioned the word preventing and said it was a key word to prevent further atrocities. And this brings to mind the question of what the Office on the Prevention of Genocide has been doing, because we haven't heard from them in a while.
That office continues its work. Very often it is more discreet work in order to get the message through, but they're continuing their work actively. Somebody had a question online?
Yes, it's me, Stéphane. Thank you, Stéphane. After President Trump's attack on Pope Leo for condemning the war in Iran, does the Secretary General think the Pope fulfilled his moral duty as a religious leader or stepped into political territory that should be left to governments?
Far be
And
it.
given that Pope Leo has said he's not afraid of President Trump, does the Secretary General feel equally free to speak out in the same way?
Excuse me, Benno? Sorry. I'm sorry. Far be it from the Secretary General to judge the work of the pontiff. What I can tell you is that the Secretary General has immense respect for Pope Leo. They met last June. They met for over an hour, and I think they share a lot of the same sensitivities when it comes to preventing conflict, when it comes to pushing for peace, when it comes to the respect of human dignity. As for the Secretary General, I think it may never rise to the level that you want, but I think the Secretary General has been pretty open and blunt in his remarks. Anybody else online before I go back to the room? Okay, Alex.
I guess it's also a follow-up. I'm wondering if you guys have seen an AI picture of President Trump healing somebody in the style of Jesus Christ, and if you have any reaction on that.
I have seen it, and I have none.
Thanks.
Okay, on that note, I've healed all of you, no doubt, so I wish you a good day.